For travel and adventure photographers, the 6D Mark II is the perfect step up into the world of full-frame photography. If you haven't already seen it, please check out our first video where we run over some of the basic functions of the 6D Mark II and some of the button features and where they are located. In this video, we're going to have a look at some of the advanced settings on the 6D Mark II to help you get the most out of your new camera. Let's get started. Like many EOS cameras, the 6D Mark II is equipped with a fully automatic shooting mode. So if you're unsure of settings to use, or you want to hand the camera to somebody else to take a quick photo for you, the auto setting is here to help. Next, we're going to have a look at some of the more advanced shooting settings on the 6D Mark II. I'm going to start with TV. So on the top mode dial, by pressing in the center here, I'm able to turn my camera to the TV mode. TV mode stands for time value mode. In this mode, we're able to change the shutter speed of the camera to affect our creative outcome. To change the shutter speed in this model, we can do it a couple of ways. Firstly, we can use the top rotational dial to increase or decrease the shutter speed accordingly. Another way to change the shutter speed on this model is to use the touchscreen by first pressing the Q, hiding in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, then touching the shutter speed. If we do it twice, we now have the ability to use our finger to swipe left or swipe right to change the shutter speed accordingly. Now that we know how to change the shutter speed, let's look at some of the creative differences a fast versus a slow shutter speed can give us. I'm going to put the camera in live view mode so you can see what I see. My first frame using our bobblehead is going to be shot at 1/500th of a second. In essence, it's going to freeze any movement within the frame. As you can see, it appears that the object is not moving at all at this speed. However, if we want to show the viewer of the photo that we have movement in the image, we can slow this shutter speed down. Let's try this next frame at 1/5 of a second and see what happens. As you can clearly see in playback, the bobblehead is moving. Whilst I'm in playback, I can also pinch zoom to magnify the object. Next, we're going to talk about aperture value. On the top dial, we can turn to the letters AV. This allows us to change our depth of field, really pushing the creative boundaries of our camera. Just like in TV mode, we can adjust our AV by using the top rotational dial to increase and decrease our aperture. Let's have a look at how aperture affects our depth of field and what that actually means. So using this lens, I am at f4. I'm touching the screen to select the yellow object as my point of focus. Let me take that photo. If we have a look in playback, you'll notice that the yellow object is in focus and the other three objects are out of focus. This is what we call shallow depth of field. Coupled together with the touchscreen, this is a great way to isolate a subject against the background. Perfect for portraits. On the other hand, let's try the opposite end of the spectrum and increase our aperture to f22. Let me take that same photo and let's have a look at the difference. Now you'll notice in playback, all four items are in focus. This is what we would call a broad depth of field. Very handy in landscape photography. There are two ways to change AF points on this camera. Firstly, if we use the live view function, it's as simple as touching the screen for the point where we would like the focus to be. Another way of changing AF points is when you're not using live view to be able to move that AF point around the screen when you're looking through the viewfinder. To do this, we use our autofocus point adjustment button located in the top right. By pressing this button, we now have access to the autofocusing screens. Being a touchscreen model, we can either simply touch the point where we want to change to, or alternatively, we can also use the up, down, left, right arrow keys to move the autofocus point to the position we would like it to be. Let's discuss the AF button. What does AF mean? It stands for autofocus, and what it does is changes the autofocus shooting modes. Let's have a closer look. Within the AF button, we have three options: one shot, AI focus, and AI servo. Let's take a closer look at these three options. Firstly, one shot. One shot is a locking focus method. What do I mean by that? In the one shot function, when we half press for focus, you'll often hear a beep signifying that the frame is in focus. This is now locked. It's just waiting for me now to push a little harder to release the frame. The next AF method to look at is AI servo mode. The big difference between one shot and AI servo is when I half press on the shutter release button, it's constantly tracking for focus within the group or single point of AF that I have selected. This is a great method for high-speed action, such as sport. The third AF option this camera offers you is AI focus. Let's have a closer look at what that means. Once you're in AI focus mode, you'll notice through the viewfinder in the bottom right-hand corner, the camera will display whether you're in one shot or AF focus servicing mode. AI focusing mode is a hybrid focusing mode. It allows the camera to decide whether you should be in one shot or AI servo. The 6D is equipped with an AF on button on the rear, also known as back button focus. What is this and how does it work? Let's have a closer look. So to start with, to identify the button, if you rest your right hand on the camera, you'll notice that there's a little button called AF on right next to your right thumb. The AF on button's easiest explanation to understand is it takes over the half press function of your shutter key. So if you're in AI servo mode tracking a subject in movement, it's much more comfortable to rest your thumb on that button constantly and then release the frame when ready. Let's take a look at white balance and how that affects our images. Here I am in live view so you can see what I see. At the moment the camera is set to auto white balance. What it's doing is it's taking a measurement of the light available in the room and it's making a decision based on the light that it sees to make the whites look white. Why is the white balance adjustable? There are two reasons why we might adjust the white balance. Firstly is if the auto white balance is not giving us the result that we're satisfied with. Alternatively, we can use a customized white balance to put a feeling or a mood across the photo to influence our viewer. Let's take a closer look at some of the settings. Here I am in live view. To change my white balance in live view, all I need to do is push the Q button, and you'll notice at the top right, the letters AWB, which stand for auto white balance. If I touch this selection, along the bottom, we will see some options. Firstly, we see daylight, shade, cloudy, tungsten. Let's have a look at how the white balance can affect our frame. Let's start with an auto white balance shot. Frame looks good, color looks natural. Let's change this now from auto white balance to shade. What will happen is it'll put a yellow color cast across our frame, making it look warmer than it really was. If I want to make the frame look cold, why not try changing your auto white balance to tungsten, which is signified by the picture of a light bulb. Instantly, we can see a cooling effect within the frame. Why don't you experiment with your white balance on your landscapes and portraits and see what the effect is yourself? Like all EOS cameras, we're able to change the exposure compensation. What does that mean? Regardless of the mode that we're in, whether that be program, TV or AV, we can still make a decision as to how bright or dark that frame should be. Here I have my scene, and the camera has made some decisions for me around shutter speed and ISO. If I look at this frame and I say it's too bright, I can use the rear wheel to turn the exposure down, and you'll notice in live view, the exposure becomes darker immediately. Another way to change exposure compensation is using the touchscreen. If I simply touch the light meter at the bottom, I can now swipe to the right to make it brighter or swipe to the left to make it darker. Let's have a look at drive modes and how we might use different drive modes for different situations. When we're in the drive modes menu on this camera, we see a number of options. The first option is single shooting mode. What this simply means is that when I depress the shutter release button once, it only takes one photo, even if I hold it for a length of time. Another option within the drive mode menu is high speed, continuous, also known as burst mode. The difference with burst mode is when I hold my finger on the button, it keeps shooting. This is really handy for action photographers, people shooting sport, for example. Another drive mode on this model is silent shooting mode. This essentially slows down the mirror box and shutter release mechanism to make as little noise as possible when taking a frame. Ideal for a sleeping baby. One of the other drive modes that you'll see here is a 10-second self-timer. This is particularly handy if you're trying to take a family portrait and you've got to be in it too. Pop the camera on the tripod, get your focus, release the shutter, the camera will count to 10 and then take the photo. Another self-timer mode that you'll notice is the 2-second self-timer. This is very handy for if you're doing long exposures and you've left your remote release cable at home. This allows you to trigger the camera, allowing it to count to 2 before taking the frame. The idea being you release the frame, let go of the camera, avoiding camera shake, and then the exposure begins. Another great feature in this model is the interval timer mode. For those who like to do time-lapse photography, I'm going to show you how to access it. To get to our interval timer, we just use the menu button, navigate to our red menus, and if we come across to menu number 4, you'll notice that the very first option is an interval timer. We enable this simply by using the scroll wheel or the touch screen. Before I hit enable though, you'll notice that there is an ability to push the info button to set up some more detail. What we're allowed to do in here is we can change the time between shots. This is represented in hours, minutes, and seconds. It's currently set to take a photo every 10 seconds. The number of shots now needs to be determined, and we can select anything from 1 photo to 99 photos. If we need to do more than 99, we simply change this all the way down to 00, which becomes unlimited. The only limits on this then is the charge in the battery and the size of your memory card. Otherwise, it'll keep shooting. If you're not sure if you've successfully entered into Velometer timer mode, if you look at the top screen, over by the shot count, you'll notice a little symbol that says timer. If you can see this, you're ready to go. 2 ways of stopping the interval timer. Firstly, there's the on-off method. Simply turn the camera off and turn it back on. The timer mode will now be disabled and you'll be ready to shoot as normal. Another way to disable the timer mode is simply re-enter the menu system and change the option to disabled. What if you want to do long exposures? Not only has this model got a bulb mode, it also has a digital timer built into the menu system, which gives us the customization that we're after to plug in a specific time in minutes, hours, and seconds. Let's have a look at how to change it. So to change my bulb timer, again, all I need to do is go into my menu, and you'll notice right below where we were playing with interval is the bulb timer. We can enable this, but before we do, again, we can press the info button to be able to select a specific time. This is shown in hours, minutes, and seconds. For example, it's currently set up to do a 2-minute and 1-second exposure. Press OK to lock in that time. To confirm that we have entered bulb timer mode, looking at the top of the camera, you'll see the symbol timer appear again. To disable bulb timer mode, there are 2 ways we can do this. Firstly, we can go into the menu system and disable it. Alternatively, we can turn the camera off and turn it back on again, and it's ready to shoot as normal. Like many of the Canon EOS models, we have multiple picture styles. What are they and how do they work? Let's have a look. To change my picture styles, again, I can use the touchscreen to be able to tap on my picture styles options. Within this picture styles menu, we have settings such as automatic, standard, portrait, landscape, fine detail, neutral, faithful, but what I'd like to show you today is monochrome. If I go into live view now, you'll be able to see what the camera sees. And you'll notice straight away a lovely monochrome black and white image. Something else to be aware of when entering monochrome mode is you'll see an asterisk appear on the top screen and also through the viewfinder. This is simply to remind you that you are in monochrome mode. It's worth pointing out at this time too, if you're shooting a RAW file, when you download to your computer, the RAW file will still come through in color. The monochrome mode will really only affect JPEG in camera. With many EOS cameras, you'll notice that there is a video mode. To enter video mode, all we need to do is turn the toggle next to live view to the video mode. You'll notice the screen goes into live view immediately and it's awaiting further instructions. All we need to do now is gain our focus, our composure and composition, and then once we're ready, we just hit start stop. You'll notice a red light appear in the top right hand corner signifying that we are recording. Also, you'll notice that the memory card light is flashing. This is normal. It's just showing that we're reading and writing from the memory card at this point in time. Once we're finished that video, we just need to hit start stop. The video will cease and then we're ready to go again. There's another way to do a time lapse with this model also. We can do a time lapse movie. To do this, we just need to put the camera into movie mode. The next step is to go into our menus. And if we look across to our red menu number 5, you'll notice that there is a time-lapse movie option. If we now enable this option, it gives us 2 settings to select from to begin with. Firstly is 4K or Full HD. This is referring to the output resolution of the camera. Let's try 4K to start with. Once we've enabled our time-lapse movie function, all we need to do then is tell it what interval we would like. At the moment, I've got it set for 3 seconds. The number of shots total in the sequence. Mine's set to 300. You'll notice down the bottom here, it gives us some great information. So right now it's telling me on the left-hand side that it's going to take just under 15 minutes to complete that sequence. On the right-hand side, it's telling me that the playback of that sequence will be 12 seconds. So I can then go and make some adjustments on my interval or number of shots to suit the brief or the length of time lapse that I would like to capture. A couple more functions to be aware of in this menu setting. Firstly is the auto exposure function. There are 2 options, fixed first frame and each frame. What this means is when we enable that time-lapse function, if we have a fixed first frame, the exposure will not change for all 300 photos. If I select the each frame option, it will actually meter for each frame individually. An example of this would be a fixed first frame sunset time-lapse would eventually fade to darkness, as where in each frame option, the camera would adjust the ISO accordingly to give us that sunset with all the detail in the foreground. The other two options here is LCD Auto Off. It's a good idea to enable this. It'll actually turn the rear screen off, which will extend your battery life. The last option is Beep Whilst Image Taken. You can either enable or disable this. Once we've got all that ready to go, all we need to do is press the menu button to come back to the shooting screen. You'll notice it gives us some instructions on the screen to test our exposure first to make sure our first shot's going to look right. Once we're happy, all we need to do is hit start and the sequence will run from there. Another great feature of this camera is to be able to take multiple exposures and have the camera assemble those images into one output image. Let's have a look at how to enable multiple exposures. All we need to do is press the menu key. Navigate to the third red menu. Second from the bottom, you will find multiple exposures. We can enable this and we're ready to shoot. To shoot my multiple exposure, I'm going to start with my subject on the left-hand side of the frame. I've used the touchscreen here to pick the point of focus, and of course I release the frame with my shutter button. Now what I can do is move my object to the right. You'll notice on the screen I'm left with a ghost image from the first frame, and it gives me a live view of what's happening in the second frame. Now I can use the touchscreen again to select my item, this time on the right of frame, and release the shutter. You'll get a signal on the screen that says busy. What this signifies is it's taking frame 1 and frame 2 and putting them together to create one single picture. Why not get creative and try some multiple exposures outdoors with the same person standing in different positions? The old question of should I shoot RAW or JPEG pops up all the time. Put simply, a RAW file takes all of the data from the sensor, saves it to the card, and allows you to change and manipulate that photo and develop it later with all access to the data that was available at the time of capture. It really is there for those who love to post-produce their images and get the most out of their photos. On the other hand, a JPEG file is compressed in camera. You're allowing the camera to make the decisions for you, and it doesn't give you the same bandwidth to be able to develop that photo in post-production later. JPEG is seen as a quick and easy way to produce images for social media. Can't decide between JPEG and RAW? This camera will allow you to select RAW and JPEG at the same time, so you can make your mind up later which file you'd like to use. To do this, when you're in the image quality menu, you can either use the touchscreen to select between the options or the multifunction scroll wheel. In this case here, I've now set up this camera to shoot RAW and JPEG, and I'll make my decision later. This EOS camera has many buttons, and a lot of them are customizable. To enter our custom functions menu system, the easiest way to do this is with the touchscreen. Simply press Q to activate the touchscreen, and over on the right-hand side, you'll see the Custom Controls logo. Press this twice, and it will launch you into the Custom Controls console. On this image, it shows you the buttons that you can change. And for instance, if I want to change the shutter release button to only shoot, I can move it off the AF setting and go to metering start and select. By doing this, my front button no longer does autofocus, and only my rear AF button will become focused from this point forward. To undo this value, all I need to do is go back into the custom functions, select my shutter release button, turn AF back on, and I'm ready to shoot again. So check out the custom controls menu if you'd like to customize your EOS 6D. Let's say you loaned your camera to someone and they played with all the custom controls and you're not sure what's going on. There's a quick and easy way to reset your camera back to factory defaults. Let's have a look at how. To clear all camera functions, all we need to do is press the menu button, navigate to the yellow menus, locate the 5th yellow menu, and the second option down is to clear all camera settings. Hit set, OK, confirm, and now the camera is set to factory default. I hope this video has helped you to understand a few more features about your 6D Mark II.